Welcome to the St. Louis Art Museum's Art Speaks program. My name is Dellen Stevenson, and I am the 2021-2022 Romare Bearden Graduate Fellow here at the St. Louis Art Museum. Before we begin, please familiarize yourself with the Q&A section located on your screen. Feel free to enter your questions at any time during this program, and we will choose a few to answer at the end. Also, there's a live auto transcription available for this program. Please click the CC icon to activate or deactivate the subtitles. For today's talk, Art Speaks, But You See Me, we are joined by Shaka Myrick, the 2021-2023 Romare Bearden Graduate Fellow. Thanks for being here today, Shaka.
Thank you, Dellen. Hello again, everyone. I'm Shaka Myrick, the 2021-2023 Romare Bearden Graduate Fellow here at the St. Louis Art Museum. Today's Art Speaks will emphasize the freedom of art making by discussing the work of two artists in celebration of Juneteenth in 2022. It's all about visibility and agency, not only as an African American, but as a Black artist. First, I'd like to briefly remind you all of a few historical facts about the Juneteenth holiday and how it came to be. In 1863, during the American Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation to declare more than 3 million enslaved Africans living in Confederate states legally emancipated. However, more than 2 years passed before the news reached African Americans living in Texas. It wasn't until the Union soldiers arrived in the city of Galveston on June 19, 1865, that the state's residents finally learned that slavery had been abolished. The former enslaved Africans immediately took to the streets in song, prayer, and dance. The following year, on June 19th, the first official Juneteenth celebration took place in Texas. The original festivities included prayer meetings and singing spirituals. Within a few years, African Americans in other states celebrated Jubilee Day as an annual tradition. This celebration has continued across the United States well into the 21st century, typically including religious services, speeches, educational events, family gatherings, picnics, and festivals with music, dancing, and a whole lot of good food. Juneteenth became a state holiday in Texas in 1980, and a number of other states subsequently followed suit. In 2021, Juneteenth was consecrated as a national holiday. June 19th is also celebrated outside of the United States, used by organizations in several countries to recognize the end of slavery and to honor the culture and achievements of African Americans through history. And what would Juneteenth be, and what would freedom be without a flag to commemorate it? Deliberately colored red, white, and blue, like the American flag, the Juneteenth flag has a white star in the center meant to represent both Texas, the Lone Star State, and the freedom of enslaved people in all 50 states. Last year, in celebration of Juneteenth, Tiffany Moman, founder of the Black Craftspeople Digital Archive, delivered a lecture about the decorative arts, architecture, and handcrafts created by African Americans in the early American South. This recent acquisition, titled JAR by David Drake, was featured to help highlight the concept of objects made by African Americans and to discuss how scholars, curators, and art institutions have historically neglected to highlight their stories and accomplishments. You can click the link in the chat to see last year's YouTube celebration, and you'll learn a lot. But this year's Juneteenth or Freedom Day talk will celebrate works by Black artists that are activating social change through personal choice. Today isn't about the history of enslavement of African people, systemic oppression, or the quasi-freedom my ancestors and my people received on paper. Absolutely not. Today, we're going to focus on works by Glenn Ligon and Sam Gilliam, Black artists who take up space and disrupt the norm exclusively through their method of making work that is seen only as they choose. Glenn Ligon was born in 1960 in the Bronx, New York. He attended the Rhode Island School of Design for 2 years beginning in 1980 and received a BA from Wesleyan University in 1982. In 1985, he began to make abstract work and completed an independent study program at the Whitney Museum in Lower Manhattan. The course encouraged Ligon to broaden his methods outside of painting and experiment with a variety of forms of artwork. It was there that he began to use the inspiration from books that he read by authors like Walt Whitman, James Baldwin, and Mary Shelley. Ligon started to insert the material and direct text that had become meaningful to him into his paintings. One of the many works in the St. Louis Art Museum's permanent collection, Study for Frankenstein 1, borrows text from Mary Shelley's 1818 novel, Frankenstein. It's the story of Victor Frankenstein, who creates a human-like creature as an unorthodox scientific experiment. But this work reads, "Sometimes I wished to express in my own mode, but the uncouth and inarticulate sounds that broke me frightened me into silence again." This excerpt, transposed onto canvas with black oil stick, gesso, and stencil, is a representation of the denial of agency and visibility of a living being. Overall, Glenn Ligon's work focuses on appearance and disappearance, considering the need, almost requirement, to assert our presence in a country we've been in well before there was a country to call the United States. Ligon also uses text from this classic novel, Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. It is a first-person narrative that explores the African-American experience in mid-century America. I'll discuss that work in the next slide, but first, let's take a moment of reflection on our own. If you will, recall a time when you felt invisible. Invisible in the sense that you were robbed of an opportunity to express your opinions, emotions, and needs as a human. Now think of a time when you felt too visible, wanting to observe or simply enjoy a moment, but instead looked to as the voice of a group of colleagues, friends, or family members. Does the recollection of either of those situations induce the same type of frustration, anxiety, or isolation? Do these feelings overlap? Feel free to add a comment in the Q&A box on your screen. And no, I feel you. And if no one else does, I see you. Glenn Ligon's Invisible Man works thick layers of paint by building up letters on top of letters. The text can be deciphered when you look closely, but otherwise it blurs into abstraction. Notice the shape that the dark letters take in the center of the canvas. You see it? They're portraits and they kind of emerge from the canvases. On the left is a view of the back of a head, and on the right, a profile view. The text gives shape to the anonymous man in Ellison's book, yet in a way it dissolves the character. Ligon's fluctuation between visibility and invisibility is meant to challenge our own perceptions and personal biases, like we just did. This canvas reads, "I am an invisible man. No, I am not a spook like those who haunted Edgar Allan Poe, nor am I one of your Hollywood movie ectoplasms. I am a man of substance, of flesh and bone, fiber and liquids, and I might even be said to possess a mind. I'm invisible, understand, simply because people refuse to see me." In palindrome number 1, Ligon uses white neon lights to create words that cast shadows and illuminate a message in a simple script. He is speaking directly to the viewer through this piece. A palindrome is a phrase or sequence that can be read the same way in either direction. For example, words like civic, level, deed, even phrases like "name now one man" and "no, it is opposition" are palindromes. Face me, I face you is a Nigerian expression that refers to sharing a mattress in the cramped quarters of many units and buildings in Lagos. In this work, Lygon goes beyond the grammatical reference and gives us a conceptual palindrome in his use of words. Face me, I face you, where in any given relationship, the me and the you could be used interchangeably between the two people. I've had the privilege of viewing this work in person at the Phoenix Art Museum and witnessed the size and the literal meaning of face with the conceptual tone of reflection. And wow. You see me? Sam Gilliam was born in 1993 in Tupelo, Mississippi. He moved with his family to Kentucky as a child and fast forward, earned his MFA from the University of Louisville in 1961. Gilliam established himself at the forefront of American abstraction while working in Washington, D.C. In the early 1960s, Sam Gilliam was associated with the Washington Color School, a group of color-filled painters from D.C. Color-filled painters preferred flat, geometric, simple compositions that allowed them to explore color and color relationships as a primary theme in their work. As an African-American artist in the nation's capital at the height of the civil rights movement, Sam Gilliam's work reached beyond aesthetic. It was a way of redefining art's role during a time when society was undergoing dramatic change. Inspired by scores of jazz music, his often lyrical abstractions continue to take on a variety of forms, modes, and materials. His experiments with paint application were seen as the radical transformation of traditional canvas supports, profoundly expanding the possibilities for the future of abstract painting. Sam Gilliam continued to elaborate on his color field process by disrupting the boundaries between the visual world of painting and the tangible world outside of it. At a time during the civil rights movement, when African-American artists were expected to create figurative work explicitly addressing racial subject matter, Gilliam persisted in pursuing the development of a new formal language that celebrated the cultivation, expression, and individual voice of non-objective cultural and political ideas. Known for literally breaking the canvas and criticized for not depicting humans in his work, Half Circle Red is an example of Sam Gilliam's work where he didn't even use a paintbrush. Instead, he poured paint onto this canvas, balled it up, tied it up, then let it dry to create this bold, vibrant surface. Later, he uncrumpled the canvas and cut it into pieces that he combined to install directly onto the wall without a frame. In fact, this work is on view at the St. Louis Art Museum right now, hanging by a series of push pins. It's really cool, and you all should come see it. Consequently, this organically constructed painting does droop and drape with small gaps and bulges, emphasizing the true test of time the properties of his materials possess. Now, color and texture are most evident in Golden Neck. This offset color lithograph and screen print is hand painted as a collage of paper that is woven together. Gilliam cut up, reassembled, sewed, and raked paint across the prints he pulled from the press. And this is another prime example of how he deviates from the traditional rectangular canvas format, lending his work to more sculptural qualities. The work was made experimentally at the Brandywine Workshop, a studio in Philadelphia founded in 1972 with the expressed intent purpose to expand printmaking opportunities for artists of color. Gilliam's piece, Ruby and Ossie, is acrylic paint on plywood with metal hardware. It is named after one of the most revered Black couples on the American stage, Ossie Davis, actor, writer, producer, director, and Ruby Dee, a famous actor and writer. In this work, passages of color interact with the holes cut into the wood to reveal the negative space behind it. There's also a piece of wood hinged to the work, and it swings kind of like a door. This interaction with space continues Sam Gilliam's interest in the sculptural qualities of painting. By the year 2000, when this work was made, Gilliam began using industrial materials like plywood and metal to explore paintings as architectural assembly. The late Ronald Ollie, pictured on the left, was a highly venerated collector around the country. He first experienced art here at the St. Louis Art Museum, thanks to his parents. Fun fact, he collected his first work of fine art through an artist who was attending a church in Kansas City, Missouri. KC, stand up. Ronald Ollie also maintained friendships with many of the artists whose work he collected, especially Sam Gilliam. In a presentation at SLAM, Ron Ollie recalls that Sam Gilliam asked him what color to paint the back of Ruby and Ossie. Ollie responded, "Whatever you want," which to me is a vital moment of returning agency to the artist, even if he is a friend. Remembering his initial exposure to art, Ronald Ollie didn't think twice to entrust SLAM with the 81 works of art by 33 Black abstractionists, gifted by him and his surviving wife, Monique McRipley Ollie. I'd like to extend a very special thank you to Monique for providing this exclusive photograph of Ronald Ollie and Sam Gilliam. And you can learn more about this 2019 exhibition, The Shape of Abstraction, Selections from the Ollie Collection, by clicking the second link in the chat. So Sam Gilliam and Glenn Ligon expressed visibility and agency in very different ways, and that's exactly why I chose to discuss their work as activism. Ligon challenges the role of Black history as a requirement in Black art, turning the concept on its head by using text painting to be as visible as he chooses. Sam Gilliam dismantles canvases from the frame, drops the brushes, and creates art that you cannot ignore, or quite literally put in a box. Disregarding the pressure to make popular work, he produces art that commands presence as a way to contribute to the legacy of art history, instead of reiterating narratives of the fractured history of America. Thank you for attending the St. Louis Art Museum's virtual talk, which is just the beginning of the museum's Juneteenth celebration. Be sure to follow the St. Louis Art Museum on Instagram for the rest of the weekend, because for the first time ever, I will be taking over SLAM's Insta. And I'm making history, y'all. And if you're in the St. Louis area, stop by the museum with the family to complete a great scavenger hunt featuring work on view by Black artists and created by our moderator and 2022 Bearden Fellow, Dylan Stevenson. Happy Juneteenth weekend to all of my people celebrating. It's official, it's federal. They see us. And remember, art speaks, but you see me.
Thank you so much, Shaka. This was a great Art Speaks. So we have a couple of questions. Let me wait for some to come in. What is your favorite work from Sam Gilliam and Glenn Ligon?
So many great works. From Sam Gilliam, I'm really drawn to his Drake paintings. They are big, bold, you can't miss them. They really take over a room. The shadows, the materials he uses to hang them, very beautiful. I'm also drawn to some of the light work by Glenn Ligon. But here at the museum, we have this incredible collection called a Runaway series, where essentially Glenn Ligon asks a group of friends one by one to describe him. And he superimposes the descriptions that they give with ads that look like enslavers searching for their then property. I think it's really beautiful work, and the juxtaposition is awesome because you think that he is being described as an enslaved African, but really he's being described as a Black guy with glasses and, a tan shirt on. So.
Great. Thank you so much, Shaka. Getting lots of love in the Q&A section. You have one from Monique McRipley-Ollie, who is watching the Art Speaks today. Thank you, Shaka Myrick, for a wonderful presentation and your highlighting tribute of Sam Gilliam's works from the Bert and Thelma Ollie Memorial Collection. We have another question coming in. Are these works of art part of the permanent collection? How long will these works be at the museum?
Several of the works I mentioned today are in the permanent collection. Those would be Study for Frankenstein #1 by Glenn Ligon, Sam Gilliam's Half Circle Red, Sam Gilliam's Golden Neck, and also Sam Gilliam's Ruby and Ossie. Now, out of those works, Study for Frankenstein #1 and Half Circle Red are on view now in the contemporary wing. Golden Neck is housed in our print department, the study room for prints, drawings, and photographs. You can make an appointment to see that work. And Ruby and Ossie, that sculptural work is not yet on view.
I think we have time for one more question. The historic events in the 60s shaped these artists' works were in active defiance. That was their activism. Has your experience as a Black woman shifted your feelings about society? If so, where does your activism present itself? Is it through your art, your writing, your research? Tell me a little bit about that.
That is a wonderful question. Has my upbringing shaped my hope or shifted my feelings in society? Well, I was blessed to grow up in a home that celebrated my ancestors as a blessing, like a badge of honor. I have noticed that my sensitivity to race relations has increased as I'm growing older and in the workforce and have more access to social media. And sometimes I find this growing internal tug of war between being Shaka and being Shaka, a Black woman or a Black person. I feel like that push and pull sometimes stimulates feelings of struggles that I may not have ever really experienced. So I explore these emotions through therapy and conversations with trusted friends and family. And through these discussions, I've learned that some of my triggers are actually just reactions from suppressed trauma, whether mine or someone else's. That trauma, that reaction sometimes leads me to anticipate the worst. But all this being said, my activism comes in the form of advocacy for mindfulness. I'm not a health professional, but from a mental health perspective and experience, I enjoy the outcome of sorting through my feelings, the work that it takes to detach like preconceived notions of other people, and most importantly, to not take everything personal. With that, I highly encourage Black people, Black men, people in general to practice more inward reflection like we did earlier, and to seek professional counseling, not only when something is traumatic and your world is crumbling, but to help continue to explore and better explain and nurture your emotions. For me, it's most important to remember that as much as society tries us as Black people, inner peace is something that can't be bought, sold, or stolen from us. It's all we got, and sometimes it's all we need.
Thanks again, Shaka, and thanks to everyone who joined us today. If you get a chance to come to the museum before the end of the month, stop by our information desks and pick up the Juneteenth scavenger hunt. highlighting works in the collection by African-American artists like Helen LaFrance, Jacob Lawrence, and Sam Gilliam. And you can also see the Glenn Ligon in our contemporary gallery space. Thank you and have a great day.